In a world with over 500 million blogs, how do you make sure yours stands out for your business? I'm going to tell you in just a bit. As of 2019, some estimates actually place the number of blogs on the internet at about 500 million and counting. So how can you possibly make sure yours stands out? Doesn't it seem like everyone has their own niche? Everyone is already putting their content out there. What can you contribute that's new? And the easiest way to make sure your blog stands out, and this is based on my experience as a copywriter, as a content writer, as a blogger myself, and a lot of research. The easiest way to make yourself stand out is by being you. You are your blog's unique value proposition. There's no one else quite with your unique mix of experiences, knowledge, and perspective on even an issue that's commonly known. I think this is especially important for business owners in the personal development space. So maybe life coaches, the number of life coaches is astronomical. And the reality is that there are plenty of people. There's billions of people on the planet, and they all need help to make it through their life, right? We all have different struggles, different challenges, different priorities, and every life coach can really serve the people who need them. But how do you actually get seen by the people who need you? How do you make sure that people know that they can get the help that they need? As a life coach, it's really important to remember that your personality is a big part of the experience they have with you, right? Just like with therapists as well. That connection is a huge part of how much you're able to support the patient or the client. So it's important that you showcase who you are so that people can find you and be able to resonate and say, this is my kind of person. This is someone I'm comfortable reaching out to. This is someone who I want to work with. Now, when you consider similar professions where credentials tend to overlap, for example, the number of life coaching credentials isn't huge. There's a couple standout ones, maybe 3 or 4 that really stand out. Therapists have a similar title. Most of them are registered social workers, or they might have studied psychology. There's a lot of similar credentials out there. So what really makes people trust them is beyond their credentials. That's kind of like a baseline for most people. The next level is your personality. Of course, speaking to a particular niche will help you connect with people. Using SEO best practices will also help you get visibility and to drive traffic to your website. But the thing that makes people actually stay with you, build a relationship with you, and trust you enough to give you their money is you. It's your personality. It's what value you're uniquely giving them. And it's not necessarily that the content is all that unique. It's the way you express that content and your personality that's transmitting it. Even think about that in terms of PR. If you want to get on a podcast, if you want to be featured on TV, if you want to start doing some affiliate marketing where big names are pushing your course or your coaching, you're going to need to come up with something that really makes you unique. So beyond all the traditional techniques of pitching and using an agent, etc., you also need to make sure that you're an easy person to talk to, that you can connect with people so that you can connect with the host if you're on a podcast or a TV show, but you can also connect with their audience, right? You want to make sure the audience is resonating with you. You need to show the person you're pitching that you can offer a huge amount of value, and especially that you're comfortable in that context. So whether it's being featured on their blog, you need to show that you know how to write a strong blog post. If you want to be on a podcast, you're going to need to practice by being on other podcasts, maybe with some of your peers or even fellow business owners who are your friends, maybe doing your own. And the more times that you're on TV, absolutely the more you can prove that you're comfortable in that context, especially when it's live TV. People don't want to take risks. They want to make sure that you're comfortable and you know who you are. You know who your audience is. You know how to explain yourself and know what to say. So your blog is an important foundation for all of this, right? It does help you get visibility and web traffic when you use great SEO and interesting topics. You start to build trust and trust factor with your audience as they visit the site, as you nurture them because you manage to convince them, hey, if my blog post is this good, my email list must be even better. So you have a chance to speak to them through email and your other social media platforms. And then the blog is the foundation of all the content that you're going to use for podcasts, podcasts, for TV pitches, etc. It's really the strong foundation, and it's the best place to practice using your unique brand or blog voice. This is a voice that's true to you. It's really authentic to who you are, but it's also carefully considered in terms of how it's going to resonate with your audience. So it feels like you're speaking the same language. This is the best place to practice. And of course, because it's web writing, it's very similar to the spoken word, right? It's very casual. We use a lot of contractions. Like instead of saying, I would like to, we say, I want to, or I'd like to as an actual contraction. We want it to be super personable, and that is why it's easy to practice using a very unique voice on your blog and being able to take that into all the other mediums of content. So your blog is an opportunity for you to be intentional and think about it because you have some more space and time, right? You're not going to immediately type something out and hit send, right? It's not like a chat. You're actually taking a moment to write out a draft, then revise it and be intentional before you publish it. So it can help you create kind of a guardrail around what feels comfortable to you, what feels authentic, what words would your ideal audience understand, what's jargon to them. We're going to get into those specifics in a bit, but I really want you to understand the importance of having a unique blog voice or a unique brand voice that makes you stand out in the world. So even if your content's really almost the same as somebody else's because it's a very well-known concept in the life coaching world, or you're talking about a famous book, the thing that makes it interesting for your reader and your audience is for you to put yourself into that blog post. It's your perspective, your unique interpretation, the words that you use to express it that's going to resonate with them, maybe in a way that the original author of that book didn't, or in a way that a competitor on the internet didn't quite manage to convey. Your blog voice is something you have 100% control over as well. That's so important. So if you can get it strong from day one, or at least start practicing and developing it from day one, your blog is going to be in a much stronger place. It's going to have a much stronger foundation for you to start building your platform. So what is your blog voice? It's a unique combination of your writing style, your grammatical choices, your word choice, your use of expressions, etc. We're going to go into a checklist that I go through with all of my new clients as they dive into their business blogs in just a second. But I really want to highlight the underlying principles of your blog voice. You're going to use that same blog voice not only on your blog, but also in your social media, in your email newsletters, in your email sequences, when you're pitching. It's going to create a really consistent experience with you because that's how we build trust, right? We build trust with people because they're familiar to us. We know that we can rely on them. It's really important that you use your blog as an opportunity to develop an overall brand voice, but we'll go into the real specifics of how to start using it on your blog right now. If you want to follow along using the quick 2-pager that I've created, you can find it in the description box below. So decision number 1 about your blog voice is casual versus formal language. Casual language includes contractions, everyday phrases, more regionalisms like hey guys or hey y'all if you're from the South, as you can tell I am not. So you're going to talk really similarly to the way that you would with friends, right? Formal language is much more similar to what you might use in a corporate office setting. So maybe at a bank setting, as an employee of the bank, of course. If you're working at a bank, if you're working at an investment firm, if you're working with top lawyers, that sort of thing. You can also start to use slightly more industry-specific language in a formal voice within reason. We're going to get to that in a second. Another important thing to note is that formal language would never include things like slang, generally doesn't include contractions, so you would say I cannot instead of I can't. I can't is quite casual. Anytime we use contractions, it's casual and it's a shortcut to closeness. Now, it's important to keep this in mind. Most people on the internet are expecting casual language. And if you are a solopreneur or if you're a small business owner and you're not in a very traditional industry, so maybe if you're in finance, you might choose formal language, but even so, on the internet, people really expect the casual language choice, and I would say that in the English-speaking world, we're getting increasingly casual in our relationships with each other. Instead of these traditional hierarchies in the world of work, things are starting to flatten out, and there's nowhere that's more obvious, in my opinion, than the world of online business. Everyone can have endless real estate in the world of online business. So I strongly recommend that you consider using casual language, and you can make some of the other following choices to still add a tone of professionality without being too stuffy. So, for example, you can choose polite or colorful language. So if you still choose to be polite, then you can match being casual in terms of your speech with still being appropriate, let's say, right? The alternative, if you wanted to create a really personable brand, or if you have a really scrappy personality, if you're kind of a rebel archetype, all that kind of stuff, you could totally use some colorful language. Now, I learned something when I was in grade 9 from a drama teacher. Because we were in high school, of course, some people wanted to swear in their different drama pieces, and we were in an art school. So our teacher was pretty open to that, but she had a rule, which is that before you're allowed to do it, you need to go to her and explain why you think it's important. So is it serving a purpose to be colorful, right? Are you expressing emotion in a way that doesn't quite work with more polite words? Is it a moment where someone just like loses all inhibition? If it's something like that, it makes a lot of sense to swear, because people do that in real life. So if you're going to use colorful language, I would still urge you to kind of keep that rule in mind. Is it intentional? Make sure it's not gratuitous. Otherwise it kind of loses its surprise factor or its emotional impact as well. So be intentional about that choice is my recommendation. But make a decision around that. Like, I don't particularly swear. I use very mild curse words in general in my real life. That's more authentic to me in general, but also it's kind of the brand I want to go with. Because I work with both entrepreneurs and companies, I would never want to be too gratuitous in terms of my language, because it could be off-putting to the people that I know that I connect with and work with. Your people might be different, so that's why you really need to keep in mind both your personality and your ideal audience when you're making some of these decisions around a blog voice. The next piece is a little bit more about the content itself. Now, essentially, you can choose between focusing. You can do a mix, but you can focus on personal anecdotes or things that you've learned. So that could be reviews, stats, could be talking about the latest book or movie that was out there, could be talking about a media personality. Those are generally the two extremes of the spectrum in my experience with blogs. So certainly keep in mind what it is that you do. If you are a professional blogger, you 100% are going to go dominantly with personal anecdotes. If you are a specialist in the world of education and trying to bring, for example, more interest-based education to your audience, you're probably going to talk more about some pieces of research and a mix with maybe some anecdotes from your work with real kids without probably identifying features. Then if you're in, I don't know, think of something like maybe the legal field, you might have to lean even more heavily on things like stats, talking about the latest GDPR rule, that sort of thing. The idea is to at least know what you dominantly talk about. It gives you an approach to come from any subject on, right? You could potentially talk about interest-based learning from your personal experience. Maybe when you were a kid, you didn't do well in school because you were forced to learn things that you didn't care about. So you could talk about your own experience, and then another perspective, maybe another person would approach it differently and talk about the latest research that just came out. It really does allow you to know how to approach any given topic, and you might be able to differentiate yourself in a niche by being the person who is anecdotal versus the person who focuses so much on research. There's really room for it all. This next one is also more of a spectrum. You could keep it real, or you could be sleek and polished and aspirational. I kind of use a variety of words to describe that. So I feel like I fit somewhere in the middle personally. You can check out my Instagram if you like. I'll put it in the description below, where I definitely have an intentional feed on Instagram, but in my stories, I try to show a little bit more behind the scenes of my business. I also, even in my feed, usually once a week, share something a little bit more from the life side of my entrepreneurship, right? So I might talk about things like getting a personal therapy dog, which I did a video on last month, and I'll add it here. Or I could talk about maybe living in Valencia versus living in Toronto as an entrepreneur, that sort of thing. But overall, I would say I lean towards the sleek and aspirational side of things because I really try and focus on providing value in my niche to my ideal clients who are going to find me. If you're a professional blogger in particular, you will choose probably to go with the keeping it real version, showing all the details of your life, behind the scenes. There's definitely a spectrum here, and if you can just identify more or less where you fit along the spectrum, it's going to give you a guardrail of what might be too personal versus what you consider fake, right? You can find the sweet spot that feels good to you. Next, this one is less of a spectrum and more of an intentional choice. So you could have a personal persona or a professional persona. In my opinion, a personal persona is good for people who have lifestyle businesses where they are really the face of their brand, or if they're going to be working one-on-one with people. So even someone like a yoga teacher might fit into that category. Now, if you go with a professional persona, that's great for more traditional industries as well, where you really want to appear like an expert and undeniably confident. So I would say in finance and law, those are kind of the two that come to mind. In these more traditional industries, right? Or maybe your ideal client is very high level corporate as well. You're going to want to show up very professionally. And that also is related to the past point that I mentioned about being sleek and aspirational versus keeping it real. A very professional persona is not really going to be able to do the keeping it real thing because it would cross a boundary and it would go from taking you from professional into the personal realm. So all of these decisions are usually interconnected, and if you were to break a rule, like if somehow you found a way to be totally real on social media but work with really high level corporate clients and really show up kind of spunky at the same time, like if you found a cool mix there, you would totally differentiate yourself from other people because that would be a very hard mix to find. But every personality is different, and I totally believe that there are people out there who can do it. One of the last decisions to make, and this is also an outright choice, is between the singular second person and the plural second person. So that means you versus you guys, y'all, everyone, everybody, all these words that can speak to a wider audience. English is a bit strange in the sense that you could refer to one person or a group, but you definitely want to have a person specifically in mind, like your ideal client is one person in that case, because grammatically things can kind of shift around. So make a decision. Are you speaking to one person or are you speaking to a group of your ideal clients? And be really, really consistent. If you're in doubt about what to do, always go with speaking to one person because it kind of fast tracks the relationship. It feels more like you're speaking to them one-on-one. But for some people, they find that feels a little inauthentic because they know they're sending out a mass newsletter or they're posting on Instagram to 10,000 followers. So you have to go with what feels right for you. If it doesn't feel authentic, say, hey everyone, instead. But again, I would, if you're in doubt, choose to talk to just one person. That's what I do personally too. And finally, you want to come up with a couple descriptive words that also speak to your writing style. So I have some examples here. You could write down words like casual, vulnerable, relatable, fanciful, approachable, aspirational. What is a word or a couple of words that really define the feeling of your blog posts? Are you a person who wants people to walk away feeling inspired and energetic and excited, or do you want them to feel understood and cozy? How do you want them to walk away feeling? So you can describe your blog posts in those terms too, and it'll help you check, is this topic relevant? Is it easy for me to fit in my blog voice, or am I sort of straying from my niche and my target audience? It helps you overall with the other points on your guardrail to make sure that everything is cohesive with an underlying sentiment and an underlying emotional thread. All right, that's it for how to make your blog voice stand out in a sea of millions. I would love to know what you took away from this video in particular. For example, are you going to speak to just one person or a whole group of people? Are you going to be personal or professional? Keeping it real or aspirational and sleek? What's your preference? I'd love to know what the results were of you choosing your place along these spectrums. Don't forget, if you want to spend a little time working on this, you can download the 2-pager that I created for you in the description box below. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, and I'd love for you to subscribe so that you can keep learning about copywriting, content marketing, and general entrepreneurship. It would be fantastic for you to join this community. Until next time, remember, your voice matters. Let's set it free. Okay, take care.